Hello. This is kind of an experiment for the channel. This is something I've always wanted to do, but never really got around to doing it because a lot of people already do it, and they do it very well. But a lot of them are pedophiles, so I feel like maybe it's time for me to be the dad that stepped up here. This is going to be my creepypasta readings, basically. My horror stories, my green texts, my what have you. I've got a collection of internet horror stories I've collected over the years, and I'm just going to read them with some gameplay in the background, and hopefully that's something people find interesting. So tonight's episode, starting off very easy, is we got a classic. We got some Kino. This is Dead Bart. Don't watch this expecting like a serious retelling of like a classic. I'm going to be giggling like a little schoolgirl the entire time. This is deeply, deeply unserious. This story is abysmal. You know how Fox has a weird way of counting Simpsons episodes? They refuse to count a couple of them, making the amount of episodes inconsistent. The reason for this is a lost episode from season 1. Finding details about this missing episode is difficult. No one who was working on the show at the time likes to talk about it. From what has been pieced together, the episode's production number was 7G06, and the title was Dead Bart. That's the title of the creepypasta. The episode labeled 7G06, Moaning Lisa, was made later, and given Dead Bart's production code to hide the latter's existence. It is also written entirely by Matt Groening. During production of the first season, Matt started to act strangely. He was very quiet and seemed nervous and morbid. Mentioning this to anyone who was present around Matt at the time resulted in them getting very angry and forbidding you to ever mention it to Matt himself. This just sounds like a 20... How old was Matt Groening when The Simpsons came out? This just sounds like a mid-20-somethings guy who is like getting put on primetime television and is just like a generally irritable and nervous individual. This sounds completely normal. I first heard of it at an event where David Silverman was speaking. Someone in the crowd asked about the episode, and Silverman simply left the stage, ending the presentation hours early. Okay, that also just sounds like a really pretentious voice actor just getting upset at being questioned about his art. In addition to getting angry, asking anyone who is on the show about Dead Bart would cause them to do everything they could to stop you from directly communicating with Matt Groening. At a fan event, I managed to follow him after he spoke to the crowd, and eventually had a chance to talk to him alone as he was leaving the building. I managed to follow him and fucking skinned him, dude, and wore his skin to the studio. That's why we have 37 seasons of The Simpsons, because of freaks like this, that chase people down outside of conventions. He probably expected a typical encounter with an obsessive fan, which he got. When I mentioned the lost episode, though, all color drained from his face, and he started trembling. When I asked him if he could tell me... Fucking goddamn. When I asked him if he could tell me any details, he sounded like he was on the verge of tears. He grabbed a piece of paper, wrote something on it, and handed it to me. He begged me to never mention the episode again. The piece of paper had a website address on it. I would rather not say what it was for reasons you'll see in a second, and also because I made this up. I entered the address into my browser and came to a site that was completely black, except for a line of yellow text. A link. I clicked on it, and a file started downloading. Once the download was complete, my computer went crazy. It was the worst virus I had ever seen. System Restore didn't work. The entire computer had to be rebooted. Before doing this, though, I copied the file onto a CD, and Dead Bart came into the real world. I tried to open it now on my empty computer. As I suspected, there was an episode of The Simpsons on it. Okay, so Matt Groening probably did that, just gave you like a virus as a means of telling you like, hey man, please stop. Please stop following people. We saw you talking to David Silverman earlier. You make us all really uncomfortable. The episode started off like any other, but had very poor quality animation. If you've seen the original animation for Some Enchanted Evening, it was similar, but less stable. The first act was fairly normal, but the way the characters acted was a little off. Homer was angrier, Marge seemed depressed, Lisa behaved anxiously, and Bart appeared to have genuine anger and hatred towards his parents. The episode was about the Simpsons going on a plane trip. Near the end of the first act, the plane was taking off. Bart was fooling around, as you'd expect. However, As the plane was about 50 feet off the ground, Bart broke a window and was sucked out. At the beginning of the series, Matt had an idea that the animated style of The Simpsons world represented life, and that death made things more realistic. Hence why it was... That's just a really fucked up... I'll stop interrupting. Wow, okay. The picture of Bart's corpse was barely recognizable. They took full advantage of it not having to move and made it almost photorealistic. Act 1 ended with the shot of... God damn it. Oh. Act 1 ended with the shot of Bart's corpse. When Act 2 started, Homer, Marge, and Lisa were sitting at a table crying. The crying went on and on. It became more pained and hyper-realistic. Better acting than you would think possible. The animation started to decay even more as they cried, and you could hear murmuring in the background. The characters could barely be made out. They were stretching and blurring, looking like deformed shadows with random bright colors thrown on them. There were faces in the window, flashing in and out so that you were never sure of what they looked like. This crying went on for all of Act 2. Act 3 opened with the title card saying that 1 year had passed. Homer, Marge, and Lisa were skeletally thin and still sitting at the table. There was no sign of Maggie or the pets. Oh, Maggie is the baby. They decided to visit Bart's grave. Simpsonville was completely deserted, and as they walked to the cemetery, the houses became more and more decrepit. They all looked abandoned. When they got to the grave, Bart's body was lying in front of his tombstone, looking just like it did at the end of Act 1. The family started crying again. Eventually they stopped and just stared at Bart's body. The camera zoomed in on Homer's face. According to summaries, Homer tells a joke at this part, but it isn't audible in the version I saw, so you can't tell what he's saying. The view zoomed out as the episode came to a close. The tombstone in the background had the names of every Simpsons guest star on them. Some that no one had heard of in 1989, some that hadn't been on the show yet. All of them had death dates as well. For guests who died since, like Michael Jackson and George Harrison, the dates were where they when for guests who had died since, like Michael Jackson and George Harrison, the dates were when they would die. The credits were completely silent and seemed handwritten. The final image... The final image was the Simpson family on their couch, like in the intros, but all drawn in the hyper-realistic... lifeless style of Bart's corpse. A thought occurred to me after seeing the episode for the first time. Why were their eyes bleeding? Why was I bleeding? My television was bleeding. Oh my goodness, my computer, it's all... You could try to use the tombstones to predict the death of living Simpsons guest stars, but there was something odd about most of the ones who hadn't died yet. All of their deaths are listed as the same date. That was Dead Bart 1. I didn't know there was a sequel, but I'm going to talk about that in a second. I think it's going to be pretty obvious that I'm recording this at the end of the editing process. But whatever. I realized that I hadn't recorded like a little review segment for Dead Bart 1, so here it is. I'm going to try to be a little more positive than my other segments because there's really nothing to be gained out of being super negative. I enjoyed the story for what it's worth. I will say it did something that I like I like it when stories do a lot. They take something that exists, or at the very least is like a common understanding. So for this, it's the idea that The Simpsons like predicts the future, and they put it into the format of like a lost episode creepypasta, and it's like, okay, what if The Simpsons predicted the future, but what if it's in the beginning of the series and Matt Groening is kind of like losing his mind? And I think it's very interesting. It's silly, kind of silly, but I adore the ending of all of them having the same death date, and it doesn't tell you like what that death date is or what that death date is or why they all died. It's kind of just something that the author keeps to themselves. And that makes it interesting, because then it's like you can make so many stories off of that. I mean, he destroys it in the next one, but it's, whatever. Overall, I feel like you couldn't make a creepypasta like this or a story like this now, mainly because it's already been made, but also you can't really do like a rewrite. Like, I feel like a lot of stories like Jeff the Killer or Slender Man or, old classic creepypastas could be taken and either reutilized or revitalized or just given a new coat of paint to be more palatable to 2026. I think the problem with I almost said Ben drowned. That is not the Dead Bart. I think the problem with this is that it's very violently 2010s. Like it was one of the first and most popular lost episode creepypastas, if I recall correctly. And I feel like Candle Cove was, I think, 2014. With the release of Candle Cove, it kind of mogged all lost episode creepypastas and did everything that they did but better, to the degree that anything you try to do will either be compared to Candle Cove or just falter in comparison, or just falter in general to it. You can't really do anything related to that. I also feel like the idea of making a creepypasta based around something like The Simpsons or SpongeBob or something like that is just, it's been done before and people don't want to see it anymore. And I don't know, you really can't do a remake of something like this. So it kind of just exists in this eternal purgatory of being kind of like a mid-story. But truthfully, I don't think it's that bad. I think I end up shit-talking it a lot later on in the video. But I enjoyed reading it. I like the ideas of it. It's now that it's more fresh in my mind, I think when I go to bed and wake up and every time I think back on it, I'm going to have a much more positive memory of the idea of the story than the actual story. So, like a high school ex-girlfriend. A Dead Bart update. And now we have a photo. I'll post that on the screen, I guess. Well, I had to get rid of that computer I watched the episode on. Even after complete reformatting, it never worked correctly. I couldn't delete the episode file and it kept opening on its own. I wiped the hard drive clean several times, it wouldn't go away. The sound control didn't work either. It was a laptop, but the power never seemed to run out, and I couldn't get it to turn off. I was going to keep the computer just so I'd have a copy of the lost episode, but looking at it was making me nervous. So this is already, like, where here we go. I don't want to be too mean, but we're already starting so, like, hot and heavy. Your computer can never turn off. Like, the power never runs out. At no point does the computer, like, overheat or start, like, smoking or cause problems. I understand the implication is supposed to be, like, demon-infesting computer, but it's, like, that such a, like, large malfunction of your computer would definitely cause something, and that would lead to something else that's interesting happening. The fact that the power just never runs out, I mean, I don't know how long this, like, sequel takes place in between the stories. I'm gonna say a few days maximum, realistically. But, like, if your computer's running for, like, 3 days straight after getting a virus, whatever, man, whatever. I had a reoccurring nightmare several nights in a row. The episode was playing, but instead of the photorealistic Bart corpse, I was myself at 10 years old. I found a picture of myself at 10, and the nightmare was closer to it than my own memory had been. I swear, that picture of myself at 10, dead, started flat. What? Wait, no, I didn't read that. Oh, okay, wow. I haven't been able to get the new episode out of my head, though, and decided to do more research to try and understand it. I found a few people online who seemed to know about it. Apparently, it aired once in a suburb of Portland, Oregon. I have a cousin who lives around there and was watching The Simpsons during the first season, so I asked him if he remembered the episode. That's really convenient. He asked me how I knew about it. It was a nightmare he told his parents about, and I was just a few years old at the time. I told him about the episode I saw and the people online who remembered it. He thought I was playing a prank on him, and when I got him to look at the online post about it, he screamed and hung up. He hasn't responded to any attempts I made to contact him since. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I kept searching online. I found someone who said they had a tape of it they would sell to me. I was nervous, but determined to find out the truth about this and end the matter. I bought the tape, as well as a really old and cheap TV/VCR, since I had a feeling neither would be the same after I watched the episode. Okay. The episode was pretty much the same as the file I downloaded. I don't want to say any more. This wasn't worth it, and I'd give anything to go back to how I felt when I had the computer with the file scaring me. I destroyed the tape, but it didn't help. The commercials on it, I don't want to remember them. There were monsters from my dreams I had never told anyone about. News promos about tragedies that hadn't happened yet. surreal. Is this just all 9/11? Is this just like a big 9/11 joke? It came out in 1989. It predicts tragedies and events that came out or came after its creation, and everyone dies. And this is just about 9/11. A former friend watched it with me, but he saw completely different things, with one exception. There was a seemingly live news report from June 6th, 2013. In complete monotone, he recited the details of millions of people dying in their sleep, some of them waking up for a few seconds first, rambling incoherently about something that people could only piece together had something to do with nightmares. I'm sure you can figure out what date was on the tombstones of the currently alive celebrities at the end of the episode. There's one other difference too. The joke, Homer told, was completely clear in this version. When it zooms in on Homer's face while looking at Bart, he says, "If only we were all that lucky." And that was a Dead Bart update, and that concludes our Dead Bart duology. The first was uploaded August 8th, 2010, with the sequel being uploaded October 10th, 2011. I don't hate them. You know, it's very nostalgic to go back and see all of this, and I'm happy that I'm able to go back and read these. I will say the sequel kind of undermines everything about the first, but in a really funny roundabout or inverse way. With the first, I feel like the only worthwhile part of the creepypasta is like the last paragraph of like all of these actors' tombstones ending on the same day. Like they all die on the same day and there's no date of death given. And Homer says something looking at the tombstone and you don't know what it is. You know, it's goofy that it has to be through The Simpsons, but whatever. You know, it's a unique ending, and I think I like it. It's something that is more than just all in lay head, and it's nice. Ironically, every part of the sequel except for the ending, I would say, is better. I feel like it's just kind of like a more solid story to read and listen to. It's just more interesting to imagine, aside from some stupid details, but it's more interesting to imagine him running around and going on internet forums and talking to like relatives that he knows to learn more about Dead Bart than it is for him to be like, Mr. Groening, can I please wear your skin and run the Simpsons show? Like that's just so unrealistic and ridiculous, even for a creepypasta. The ending of revealing what Homer said, "If only we were all that lucky," that's whatever. You kind of just reveal more unnecessary information, because at the end of the day, what has changed about the mass death incident, as we'll call it, that we didn't know about previously? We knew that a bunch of people would die all on the same day. We don't know what would kill them, and that's about it. Now that we know it's on June 6, 2013, which removes a bit of the mystique from the original story, because now we have a date that came and went 13 years ago, and some people probably died. But so that's, you know, you remove a chunk of the story out of that. You destroy that. You know, add in what Homer is saying, which, okay, whatever, it doesn't add anything. And then you also add in this detail of them dying in their sleep, which, sure, it's still a little mysterious and spooky, where it's like, oh, I wonder what killed them. But it's not as scary as the idea of like, everyone, a bunch of these people at least, all die in the same day and we don't know what's happening. That's scarier, because I don't know, did demons invade? Was there a massive like World War III somehow linked to The Simpsons? Like anything that I can create in my mind, or that the reader can take in their mind and create, is infinitely scarier or more interesting, because then that's like millions of stories that you could make, as opposed to just fucking Freddy Krueger. That was Dead Bart. That was Dead Bart 1 and 2, though. If this video is received well, I might do more, but I'm probably going to do a better one. Okay, bye.